The Ottoman Empire was founded at the end of the 13th century in northwestern Anatolia by the Oghuz Turkish tribal leader, Osman. After 1354, the Ottomans crossed into Europe. With the conquest of the Balkans, the Ottoman was transformed into a transcontinental empire. The Ottomans ended the Byzantine Empire by the conquest of Constantinople by Mehmed II in 1453. During the 16th and 17th centuries, at the height of its power, the Ottoman Empire was a multinational, multilingual empire. It controlled much of Southeast Europe, Western Asia, the Caucasus, North Africa, and the Horn of Africa. At the beginning of the 17th century, the empire contained 32 provinces and numerous vassal states. The mighty Turkish Empire had once been a terror to Europe. But in the 18th century, the Ottoman Empire in Europe began to decline perceptibly. The gradual decadence of the empire raised a number of knotty problems of international concern, which came to be expressed by the term Eastern Question. The question was a composite one. In part, it was the rise of Christian nationalities in the Balkan Peninsula. In part, it was the problem of growing weakness of Turkey. In part, the effect of both on the policy of great powers who had divergent interests in the Near East. The complications of the problems have been well expressed by Lord Morley. He described the Eastern Question as the shifting and tractable and interwoven tangle of conflicting interests, rival peoples and antagonizing faiths. The Eastern Question was a perplexing problem which took different shapes at different times. It continued to be a source of international disturbances till the First World War. But one constant factor was the ambition of Russia to aggrandize herself at the cost of Turkey. Who was to take place of Turkey after the dissolution of the Turkish Empire? That was the crux of the Eastern Question. In the empire, the first blow for national freedom was struck by Greece. Greece came under Ottoman rule in the 15th century. Greek Revolution was a successful war of independence by Greek revolutionaries against the Ottoman Empire between 1821 and 1829. Among the subject nations of Turkey, the Greeks had been treated with marked favor and toleration. But Turkish rule was alien and the Greeks were never reconciled to it. In the centuries leading up to the revolution, Greece witnessed modern Greek enlightenment known as Diophotismos. A wealthy Greek merchant class had attained a great deal of economic and political power within the Ottoman Empire. Their autonomy allowed them to cultivate unique cosmopolitan centers of education and commerce in their cities and principalities. This provided the material and scholarly basis for the exchange of ideas between Western Europe and the Ottoman Empire. Revolutionary nationalism grew across Europe during the 18th and 19th centuries due to the influence of the French Revolution. As the power of the Ottoman Empire declined, Greek nationalism began to assert itself. The most influential of the Greek writers and intellectuals was Rigas Faraios. Deeply influenced by the French Revolution, Rigas was the first to conceive and organize a comprehensive national movement aiming at the liberation of all Balkan nations, including the Turks of the region, and the creation of a Balkan Republic. His nationalist poem, the Thorios War Song, served as a rallying cry for Greeks against Ottoman rule. Another influential Greek writer and intellectual was Adamantios Karais, who witnessed the French Revolution. Karais's primary intellectual inspiration was from the Enlightenment, and he borrowed ideas from Thomas Hobbes, John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Karais's ultimate goal was a democratic Greece, much like the golden age of Pericles. In this stimulating environment, three young Greek merchants, Nikolaos Skoufas, Emmanuel Xanthos, and Athanasios Sakalog, influenced by the Italian Carbonari, founded the secret Filiki Eteria, Friendly Society, in 1814. The society was established in Odessa, an important center of Greek mercantile diaspora in Russia. The society's basic objective was the revival of the Byzantine Empire, with Constantinople as its capital. The Filiki Eteria expanded rapidly and was soon able to recruit members in all areas of the Greek world and among all elements of the Greek society. Alexander Ypsilantis was elected as the head of the Filiki Eteria in April 1820. He took upon himself the task of planning the insurrection. In Jassy, the capital of Moldavia, Ypsilantis issued a proclamation calling all Greeks and Christians to rise up against the Ottomans. The outbreak of the war was met by mass executions, pogrom-style attacks, the destruction of churches, and looting of Greek properties throughout the empire. The most severe atrocities occurred in Constantinople, in what became known as the Constantinople Massacre of 1821. The Orthodox Patriarch Gregory V was executed on the 22nd of April, 1821, on the orders of the Sultan, despite his opposition to the revolt. It caused outrage throughout Europe and resulted in increased support for the Greek rebels. The revolt in Greece proper assumed formidable proportion. The struggle that ensued was long and bitter, and was conducted with savage atrocities from both sides. The war developed in one of mutual extinction. The news of the revolution was greeted with dismay by the conservative leaders of Europe, committed to upholding the system established at the Congress of Vienna. The Concert of Europe refers to a general consensus among the great powers of 19th century Europe to maintain the European balance of power and the integrity of territorial boundaries. The concert represents an extended period of relative peace and stability in Europe following the wars of the French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars, which had consumed the continent since the 1790s. To Metternich, Austrian foreign minister, the Greeks were rebel against a legitimate sovereign. Canning, the foreign minister of Britain, with his doctrine of non-intervention for a time, agreed with Metternich. The concern of the powers was not so much for the Greeks as for the attitude of Russia, who was sympathetic to her Greek co-religionists and might exploit the situation. For about 4 years the Greeks maintained a heroic struggle. The Sultan called for his assistance Mehmet Ali, the Pasha of Egypt. The Pasha dispatched his son Ibrahim to the Morea. Ibrahim swept up and down the Greek peninsula with fire sword. He seemed likely to end the revolt and the Greek race down there. The fall of Missolonghi in 1826, followed by capture of Athens in 1827, broke the backbone of the Greek resistance. Russia, now under Tsar Nicholas, declared her intention to intervene to save the Greeks. But Canning was opposed to isolated action on the part of Russia. To avoid such contingency, he decided to act with Russia to put pressure on Turkey. Canning decided to act immediately. He sent the Duke of Wellington to Russia, and the outcome was the Protocol of St. Petersburg of the 4th of April 1826. According to the protocol, the two powers agreed to mediate between the Ottomans and the Greeks on the basis of complete autonomy of Greece under Turkish sovereignty. Since Britain and Russia were going ahead with their plans to impose mediation with or without France, so France decided to support the initiative. Canning therefore prepared for action by negotiating the Treaty of London with France and Russia. This provided that the Allies should again offer negotiations, and if the Sultan rejected it, they would exert all the means to force the cessation of hostilities. In the meantime, Muhammad Ali's new fleet was completed in Alexandria and sailing towards Navarino to join the rest of the Egyptian-Turkish fleet. The aim of this fleet was to attack Hydra and knock the island's fleet out of the war. On the 29th of August, Turkey formally rejected the Treaty of London's stipulations. A chance encounter with English, French and Russian fleet developed in full engagement. It ended in a complete victory for the Allies and in the annihilation of the Egyptian-Turkish fleet. Of the 89 Egyptian-Turkish ships that took part in the battle, only 14 made it back to Alexandria, and their dead amounted to over 8,000. This disastrous defeat of Turkey ensured the eventual liberation of Greece. After Navarino, the British policy changed. Canning was dead and his policy of joint action was reversed by Wellington, who had become Prime Minister of England. Officially, England was at peace with Turkey. She declared the Battle of Navarino as an untoward event and hastened to withdraw from the conflict. France followed suit. Russia was left alone in possession of the field, the situation which Canning tried hard to prevent. Russia declared war on Turkey and forced her to come to terms. By the Treaty of Adrianople, Turkey recognized the independence of Greece. It granted autonomy to the Danube principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia and also to Serbia. Russia took control of the town of Anape and Poti in Caucasus. The treaty was an important milestone in the dismemberment of Turkish Empire. It was a great triumph for Russia, which sought to break up Turkey. By the Convention of London in 1832, the Treaty of Adrianople was confirmed and the new Kingdom of Greece was placed under the joint guarantee of powers. Prince Otto of Bavaria was chosen as the King of Greece. The independence of Greece was the first example of the triumph of nationalism and was a blow to the Metternich system of status quo.